Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I'm your host, Carly, and here we break down complex issues around health, the climate crisis, and social justice through a vegan lens. We'll talk about the magic link between your well being and the planet's health, because luckily, choosing a healthier, mindful lifestyle for yourself often creates healthier vibes for our planet too. Staying consciously clueless means getting to show up knowing nothing, but staying open to all that you can learn. From feasting on plant-based meals and reducing waste to learning to meditate, every step you take contributes to your wellness and makes systematic change for the world. You can make a difference. This podcast will show you how. As I was prepping for this interview, there is so much amazing work you've done in this world that I was like, well, where should we even start? But where I often start with people is their vegan journey. So let's start there in what was the catalyst for you going vegan, and we'll start branching out from there.
Sure. It's hard because I feel like I have to start with my vegetarian journey first. I'm originally from Texas and I grew up seeing cows in the fields and
Mm-hmm.
grew up seeing cows everywhere. And when I was about 4 or 5, as I've been told from my family, I decided to stop eating cows. I stopped eating meat because in retrospect, I'm sure I can figure out why. And it's because at the time my parents were getting a divorce and my mom was raising my sisters and I by herself, and she'd have to go to work. And so I think that the separation of family really is what helped me not want to separate families because I would look at cows on the hills and I'd be so sad just thinking it'd be like if that cow's mom didn't come home or the mom didn't have the baby come
Oh,
home. And so at a young age, that's all I could see. And I thought, I don't want to be responsible for why they aren't together. And so the adult me can look back and say, oh, I know it was happening in my life at the time. But at the time, it was just, I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to hurt animals. And so I
mm-hmm.
remember being vegetarian in elementary school. And then eventually my family, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so I just had to start eating what people gave us. And so I wasn't able to stick to being vegetarian. And then when I was around 16, I was like, that's it. I'm going vegetarian. If I eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, I'm not going to eat another animal. And then when I was about 17, I got involved in animal rights in high school. There was a fur protest. And then eventually I heard a speaker who was an ex-vivisector, somebody who used to experiment on animals. And he talked about how he was a hunter, he used to experiment on animals, and how he went vegan. And that was
Wow.
it. I was like, if he can do it, I can do it. And so that was it. I stopped eating animals from that moment and came home and told my sisters they could have my belts and my shoes that were leather, but I wasn't going to be wearing animals anymore. So that's how the veganism started.
What a profound experience to have as a teenager and to open you up to see the world in a different way. My privilege kept me from thinking too hard about many things for a while, but certainly at 17, I was trying to avoid some of the things my friend who had gone vegan was telling me for a while.
Right. Yeah, I had picked up a book called Shopping for a Better World. And I was involved in the anti-apartheid movement as much as any high schooler could be, which was basically just not buying products that were vested in the apartheid regime in South Africa.
Mm.
And that also included animal testing in it and things like that. So I think for me, it was just, I was already concerned about these other issues and they just all seemed to fit in together. And even in this book, they seem to make these connections on what people like me were caring about.
The amazing work you've done, it does seem, especially with the Food Empowerment Project, this understanding of intersectionality, right? And that combining of human rights and animal rights and the rights of the earth is all reflected through that work.
Yeah, I feel like my belief system is what led me to eventually start Food Empowerment Project, that I didn't want to see that I was having to make decisions between issues that I cared about, that instead of
Mhm.
making this divide, that I wanted to make the connection onto how we can make a difference for them all and looking at food as a way to do that, that some of us have the privilege of eating one, two, three times a day and that is a lot of power that we hold. And it says a lot about ourselves and what we do and do not support. And that's what led me to found Food Empowerment Project as a way to show that these connections exist without having to make choices, and to say that we can uplift all of them and we can also say no to the things that we don't support or we don't believe in.
Were you feeling pressure from different movements that you were involved in to put all your energy there or to maybe say that's not a part of this movement?
It's a great question. Yes, I would say I've been doing animal rights since I was 17. So I started Food Empowerment Project when I was, what, gosh, how old was I? Maybe 37 or so. So,
Mm,
I think that it was primarily the animal rights movement that when I started, that's really why I started Food Empowerment Project. I was running another organization. And when I was being interviewed by people, I would bring up what was happening in West Africa for chocolate. I would bring up farm worker issues. And I was being told by people that I was hurting the animals by talking about these other issues. And so I was like, then I'm going to create my own organization where it's the mission of the organization to talk about these, so I can show the connections, that I can show that we can care about all of it. And it's not us or them or one or the other. It's uplifting all of these issues and a show of solidarity and strength. Yeah, it was primarily the vegan movement that it was like, okay, then I'm going to start my own thing.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I definitely have more pushback from trolls that are not vegans in terms of posting something on social media. But there's also that contention that I think is being very much so highlighted right now within the vegan movement of the people who refuse to move outside of that lane and the damage that does. You have so much experience working in this world. Do you see progress in the last few decades in how that conversation is framed?
Absolutely. I would say when I started Food Empowerment Project in 2007, a lot of my time was spent explaining to people how these issues were connected,
Mm,
why farm worker justice matters when you talk about veganism. That was, if we were tabling at an event, that would be a good chunk of my time. Now, with the
interesting.
younger generations, they're like, they do not need me to explain that. What are you doing and what can I do is where we're at with them. So it's
Mm.
been a beautiful, amazing shift with these younger generations that they're there. They see the connections, and we can see that evidence with their activism on so many levels right now, that they are already there. And so it's been a remarkable change.
So you're 17 and you're like, I'm going vegan. I am a part of these different social justice movements. Did you already at that age think I'm going to work in this field? This is going to be my life in terms of work?
Before I got involved in animal rights, I thought I would join the Peace Corps or something like that. At the time, I thought the Peace Corps was good. So, any of your listeners who know it's not great, at the time, I didn't really know that.
I hear you. We're with the information we had at the time.
Exactly. But yeah, I went to college for animal rights. I had some amazing
Mm.
mentors who told me what classes they thought I should take and what I should do and what experience I should have to be a good activist. And I took all the courses they told me to do. I didn't really come in with an idea on a degree. I went in with an idea on these are the classes that I need to take that will help me be a better advocate for the animals.
That's amazing and amazing that you had allies within an institution. That doesn't always happen to do this work.
You mean within the animal movement or the universities?
The universities.
Oh, that no, that the first university I went to, I almost got them sued because
Oh
I was
shit.
gonna be I was gonna be showing a video of an animal liberation front liberation of animals from a laboratory, and the school was threatened with a lawsuit for showing it. So there was just all this media attention, and then I was quoted in the paper saying that they're caving into the vivisectors, and so I left that school. They didn't really like me very much, which I was happy to go. And then the next university I went to, it was in a again, went to college in Texas. So that
Right.
first college was in San Antonio, and then I went to college in Austin as well. And both were liberal arts Catholic schools.
Mm.
And when I first got to the university, the priest was like telling everybody to stay away from me and all this other weird stuff. And then a year, two later, by the time he left, the priest who was head was tabling with me at my events.
Ha.
I had a lot of support from the Young Democratic Party. The school paper, university paper, was like publishing my stuff on a regular basis. The professors, I would have to convince them. They required us to take an internship. And I said, I only came to college to do animal rights. I have to do an internship. And of course, there's nothing in my community. And so they allowed me to do things based on what I wanted to do, which was animal rights. And so a lot of them were understanding and worked with me so that I could make sure I was getting all that I wanted to.
That's incredible and a total loss for the first school,
Thank you.
in my humble opinion.
Thanks.
So then you started doing that work pretty immediately after college.
Yeah, so I started a high school animal rights group, which was the first high school group in Texas. And then I had an animal rights group at both of my universities. And then when I was still in college, I started a citywide animal rights group in Austin, which is still around, called Action for Animals. And then I worked jobs, which always gave me ideas for campaigns for the animals. And then I eventually got a job with a national organization. And that was the first time I got paid to do animal rights.
And then you were working for, what is it, Vivo
Viva,
US?
yeah, Viva
Viva.
USA. So Viva was based in England and I ran the USA chapter.
Okay. Which was the organization that was feeling like it was siloed, not enough conversation.
My boss was amazing. She is amazing. Her name's Juliet Gallatley, and she's still in charge of Viva in England. She was great. She had no issues with it. I'd be like, okay, in this vegan guide that we're producing, I want to talk about farm worker. She was like, absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about chocolate. She was okay with it. It was the activists in the United States who had a problem with it. So they were the ones who I was getting pushback from. But she was very supportive of all of that. But yeah, so I started
That's
Viva.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we're just so different in the United States when it comes to certain things. But yeah, I did investigations at factory farms and slaughterhouses and ran corporate campaigns as part of Viva. And so that's really where I got my experience doing investigations where the animals were suffering tremendously.
So you would, through this organization, carry out investigations and then use that to try and change policy to get places shut down, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, every campaign was different because I knew each would have to be, right? I love doing campaigns. I always like to call myself a campaigner because that's like my favorite thing to do, to tackle corporations, basically. But so when I did duck farm investigations around the United States, and with that effort, we got grocery stores to stop selling duck meat. But when I did investigations of pig farms, I knew it wasn't going to be the same strategy because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get grocery stores to stop carrying pig meat. That just wasn't really going to
Right.
work. And so what I did with that campaign instead is that I worked to make it a youth campaign, got ads in school papers about pigs being kept in gestation crates for 4 years, the same amount of time students are in high school or in college,
Oof.
trying to get students to get vegan meals in their cafeterias. So I structured it that way. When I did dairy investigations, did a campaign to get Baskin Robbins and Ben and Jerry's to carry vegan ice cream. So each one was a little bit different based on what I thought could be successful. But I used the footage, the videos from my investigations for all of them.
There is so much conversation and rightfully conversation right now about how do we make change? What works? We're watching Gaza, we're watching Congo, we're watching Sudan, and for a lot of people, they're learning more in the last few months than they've had even thought of in this
Yeah.
world, I think. And so there's a lot
Yeah.
of reckoning and there's a lot of people with the best intentions, but that are like, well, okay, what do I do? What do I do? Holy shit, what do I do? And so when I hear you talking about different levels of campaigns, it reminds me, and correct me if I'm wrong, just about the varying levels of activism and work that needs to be done simultaneously. We're all, especially I feel like in these hyper-capitalist societies, looking for the answer. I would love for someone to tell me what to do to solve this
Exactly.
problem. Because that would be great. If someone could hand me a to-do list, that'd be great.
Totally. And then again, I think the main thing is remembering that it's going to be different for everybody.
Mm,
What's going to make somebody change is going to be different for everybody. And what their skill set are also defines on what it is that they can do.
mm,
I mean, my husband is a writer and I'm more of an on the streets type activist. And it took me a little bit of, yeah, acknowledging that writing is a form of activism. It may not be my strength because I'd rather be out on the street, but it's his strength, and his strength is making a difference just as much as me on the street reaching people that
mm.
way. So I think that we realize it's going to take all different kinds of things to create change. But the most important thing is us doing something
Right.
versus being complacent about the horrors that are taking place in the world to human and non-human animals. We have to stake the ground somewhere on doing something. And I feel like that's what this younger generation, yours probably included, is saying. We're not going to stand by and do nothing, whether it be protesting or at the school or organizing in your community or posting on social media, even to some extent. There has to be a lot of things because we don't know what that one thing is.
And I think there's this, especially in, again, capitalist individualistic society, we have not only been taught that just some individual actions can make change, but also we want to believe that. It's easier if I
Right.
recycle and if I do XYZ and I can check it off the list, not discrediting individual action. But how do you, if someone asks that question, is it individual? Is it collective? What do we need?
I usually say it's our individual choices and our collective voices. That
Ooh.
we can make these decisions individually, and they should matter to our hearts. They should matter to our head and our conscious that we make these decisions. But we can't act as if those decisions and things that we do alone are going to have a wider ability to create change. And in order to change anything, it's going to be beyond ourselves. Very rarely is it just one person. It's usually so much more than that. And we owe it to any cause and anything that we care about to lend our voices with others, to show that there is strength and unity.
Hmm. I think that's really important and a good reminder for everyone right now wondering what steps to take. And I read a beautiful post the other day about if you're overwhelmed about what to do over here, what can you do in your community? And that community care and that mutual aid on that level as well. I think sometimes when we think, oh, it's individual or it's the world,
Right.
and that's overwhelming too.
Yeah, I also say as well, like to look at the instead of being overwhelmed, look at it as opportunities.
Mm,
Because if we have the opportunity to make a difference, why wouldn't we do that? And when we look at, I'm very cautious of the whole vote with your dollars kind of thing. Like for me, we say eat your ethics because it really should
mm,
be more about what it says about you and what you think than anything else. But the idea that's all that we can do isn't going to be enough. And I think for people just starting out, absolutely. But I think that there's always things that people can do from their computer or talking to people or going out during the elections and making sure that their voices are heard. There's so many things that people can do. And it's just that it's a privilege to be able to do those things. And we owe it to others who don't have that privilege to do it.
I feel like there's a pamphlet that goes around on how to troll vegans on the internet that I must miss because it's the same copy
The
and
same
paste or
people,
AI generated. I don't
right?
know what it is, but I feel like it's the same ones. It's what is that doing? What are you really doing? What is that even doing? How does that? There's just this question. I could lay out a whole paragraph on that, but how do you explain or how do you have that conversation with someone to say, here's how those individual actions, here's how eating for your ethics, here's how it actually is a part of collective liberation?
Well, I think turning it back in a sense too is why does it matter? If it's good for you and it's good for another living being, why wouldn't you do it? Even if that in and of itself, do I need to look at the grand scheme of the world, or I just need to look at those individuals and say, I'm making this decision because it aligns with my values.
Right.
That should be enough. But for certain people, they don't have the same consciousness, or maybe they're asking that question because they're conflicted.
Yeah, totally.
But you know that like they want to know, like they want some type of justification, and we're never going to be able to if they can't on their own understand that an animal, and again, I say that knowing that some people live in situations where they don't have the luxury of thinking beyond themselves
Hmm.
and thinking beyond survival. But those aren't the people we're talking about here. We're talking about people who are literally doing that just to, honestly.
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of what difference does it make? Does it hurt anything to do it? Because all I see is it benefiting things. It's like with young people right now with climate crisis, I'm like, when is it ever being said that eating more fruits and vegetables is going to be bad for the planet? But we've heard enough about how eating animals and animal products is bad for the environment. So why not just do it then? Like,
Right.
why, if we know nothing negative is going to come out of it, why can't people just let go of it and just go vegan for the sake of all these young people who are dealing with a world that's in crisis right now. And so I'd say the same thing to anybody who says that as well, is like, it's not hurting anything to be
Mm,
compassionate. So why wouldn't you want to be compassionate? Why wouldn't you want to think about others? But again, we live in a capitalist society, so they're all thinking about me and what does it do for me? And I struggle with that too. I struggle with like, how do I get people to think beyond themselves?
yeah.
And that's what it comes down to, is some of them just aren't going to be able to. And we focus on the ones who we can reach and who maybe do have a concept of compassion and justice outside of their own needs.
So when you started the Food Empowerment Project, you said 2007. In those early days, what was your goal?
I actually had a full-time job. I loved my job. I worked at a nonprofit where we looked at electronics in the solar industry and the
Hmm.
environmental and worker implications of both of them.
Oh,
So
wow.
meaning that
Still relevant.
they both are full of toxic materials. They both
Hmm.
have worker issues. So we worked on that and I loved my job and I thought, I'm going to start this organization. I'm going to bring in enough money that I'm going to be able to hire an executive director to do that job. Because I love my job and I want FEP, because I was doing that as a volunteer. And we just became, the demand on what we were doing grew. And so in 2013, so that was started 2007. By 2013, a donor was able to pay me $1,000 a month. And my husband and I moved into this dumpy place and we lived there so I could get FEP off the ground. So in the fall of 2013, I start getting paid $1,000 a month. And then by 2016, we hired our first full-time employee.
And so what were some of the early projects that you're saying that demand grew? So what were
Yeah.
people looking for? What were those early projects that people were like, this is information we need?
Yeah, I would say two things. One was we had vegan Mexican food. That was all we had at the time.
Mm,
So people were definitely interested in more recipes and the idea of cultural sites, which is what now we have quite a few of them, to where people can celebrate their culture with compassion without ingredients of non-human animals. Also, we did a work initially on food apartheid in the
mhm.
community. We were in Santa Clara County where we compared high income area zip codes and low income area zip codes on access to healthy foods. So with that, then talking to policymakers about, oh, it'd be really good to know with the community, us realizing we need to get community input. After we've done this assessment, we need community input. So we need to do focus groups in the community. So that kind of developed. The other thing that developed, which is really interesting, is that our chocolate list, me talking about the chocolate work we do, had people say, what chocolate can I buy? And then all of a sudden, it was like, okay, we need a list. Okay, so we created a list, and all of a sudden, people were like, I need something that I could take in the grocery store with me. Can you create an app? So it was just like, okay, now we got to create an app. So it was just like things like that. And then I was being asked to speak more places. So that's how the demand grew, to where I was like, okay, I need to just focus on this, because luckily people were interested in the work we were doing.
And encouraging to know that there was so much interest, that it was filling clearly a gap.
Yeah. And that was it, was that there wasn't a lot of women of color starting vegan groups at the time either. And so I think it's always been harder for me and
Mhm,
harder for any women of color in the vegan movement to get the type of funding that some of these other organizations get. But
mhm.
the fact is that having other Chicanas or Latinas say, it's amazing to see someone who looks like me talking about these issues. That meant a lot. And it still does.
So the Food Empowerment Project, we're talking a lot about it in its early days. What's your elevator speech for listeners of what this organization that you started is?
Oh, my elevator pitch. Some ways, I mean, I talk about it different ways, obviously, but I think holistically, what we do is we try to make connections between various issues and show that how we can make a difference. We also create tools. So we're not just informing people that we can help them be able to what we call eat your ethics. But we are a food justice organization, and we promote veganism for the animals. We also work on farm worker justice issues, because as a vegan organization, we feel we need to give back to those who pick our food. We also work on lack of access to healthy foods in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, and we're trying to get people not to buy chocolate sourced from slavery and child labor. There's my pitch.
Yeah, incredible. I'm in. Sharks, I'm in.
Yay.
And as you've moved through the last however many years of running this organization, what are some of the biggest wins you've seen?
So we've been around for 17 years so far. We have some big wins coming up, but I cannot talk about yet. And I would say that the first thing I think is getting more people who are vegan to start talking about and looking at consistency and how they do their activism. Not so much, again, I'll always be very clear. I don't ever think activists should give up the work they're doing for non-human animals and do what we do, but just more consistency, such as not saying it's easy to go vegan because we know it's not for every community. Making sure we don't say things like that are cruelty free, that are potentially from human slavery or child labor or worker rights being violated. So I do think there's something to that. I think also just hearing people talk about farm worker justice issues as part of veganism has been amazing to see. I don't like it when it's just lip service, but I do like it when people take it to heart and aren't just using it as, see, vegans care about humans. We've had some corporate campaigns that we've won, and I think our entire existences, I think that my most favorite victory that we have right now, so to speak, is that we are now a collective. I think that's probably one of my proudest things is that I became the executive director because who else was going to do it? But I had already known from running Viva USA that it wasn't something I enjoy, that I'm much more of a programs person. I also had trouble with hierarchy. I didn't feel like it didn't feel comfortable to me. I'm not one of those boss lady people. We're equal. But it's hard to say that you're equal with somebody when at the end of the day, you're responsible for their paycheck.
Totally.
You're not on equal footing. I'm on the board. Over the years, it's something that I've thrown around to the board and had wanted to have a flat system, no hierarchy. And we had some of our team at that time were worried about being a collective. So as we hired new people, we would say our goal is to eventually become a collective. Is this something you're interested in? And we made sure that everybody we hired said yes to that question. And so we had a team of people who were all interested in it and finally got the whole board on board, so to speak, to get them to agree that this is something that we would like to do. And yeah, we had the help of a woman named Stephanie who helped us with some leadership training. And then we used Scarlet Spark, which is another organization, to help us work out like how we do things as a collective. And of course,
Mm.
it's an ongoing process. We're still going to learn. There's still things we need to do. We're looking for other collectives to meet with and just learn from as well. But I removed myself from the board, which was difficult after 17 years.
Yeah, I
But
bet.
I had been told by other people, don't ever leave your board. But how could I be on the board? Otherwise, it'd be fake. You know what I mean? Like I'd be like, oh yeah, we're all equal. We're a collective. And oh yeah, but I'm still on the board. It couldn't have worked. And so I got off the board a month and 11 days ago or something.
But who's counting?
Counting it up. And it's been a beautiful process. I have seen, because again, we started the process last year.
So what does
And
that look like to become a collective? What does that change or mean?
it means that everybody makes decisions. We decide what decisions we all get to make
Mm,
together. So we have a list of things that we're like, okay, these things we all have to make a decision on. These are the things that everybody's required to vote on. We rotate going to the board meetings. So we always have a representative at the board meetings. And we all made decisions together on salaries. We made decisions together on our titles. We have assessment teams for people who like oversee each other. And it's been like we have a young person. I shouldn't say young person, a young woman. I can't help it. I'm so proud of her. She's 22. And when she started,
incredible.
she was a bit shy and she's just embraced it. I've seen her grow and flourish. We have another young woman who's like 25, 26, just seeing her like hit her spark, hit her, and to watch them. And I've told them this shouldn't be any secret to anybody. Part of my goal in creating it was that I have young women of color who I strongly want to know and understand what it's like to be in charge
Yeah.
and make decisions, because that's not something that I had for a very long time. And I want them to have that. I want them to have that experience. I want them to be able to make decisions for the organization. We have an amazing youth advocacy coordinator, and That's not her title anymore. I can't. We all have collective members at the end of our titles now, and I'm still learning them all. But and to have her like understand that, like, how can I make decisions on a youth campaign? Really? I can give the background and structure on like FEP and how we would phrase things and
Right.
look at things, but she's going to know. All the three of them are going to know way better than I do on what works for young people. It
Right.
just she should be the one making those decisions, not
Right.
me. So yeah, it's fun things like that happen.
Well, and it feels like what that's doing is directly disrupting the capitalist model that nonprofits fall into. And I know there are, of course, so many nonprofits in our world trying to make up for our systems lacking, right? But in my experience working for and working with nonprofits turn into little capitalist systems because everyone's just trying to fight for small pools of money and all of these things and
Yes.
the hierarchy and all of that. So it sounds like moving this organization to a collective model is directly speaking to how you want to see the world.
It is. And to me, it's the natural evolution of the organization.
Mm,
We believe in worker rights. We
right.
believe that communities should have the most say in what it is that they do. So how could this organization be structured any differently? And we want to make sure that we are exhibiting, like what I've always tried to do is make sure that we lead by example, that we're lead by, it sounds really arrogant, but what I mean more than that is like we do what we do. Other people don't like it, they don't have to do it. We're not going to really, this is how we think things should be done. And this is our way of saying this is the type of system we think should be in the world. We want to say this is how it should be and hope that others will follow.
Mhm.
Because it needs to that's the biggest problems in the world is equity. No, not everybody being treated as equals and the same and given the same rights. And so our organization needs to be at the forefront of showing how this is possible. And again, not saying at all that we've nailed it yet. We are, but we're doing really good. And just having different members of our team grow and shine and flex themselves has been fantastic.
And I think too, like you said, we're not nailing it yet, but the pressure sometimes, I think, in vegan movements, in environmental spaces, all of it is that when people feel like, wow, this is new information, I was ignorant to even knowing this existed, then there's this pressure of, oh, I have to do it perfectly. Whether
Right.
it's going vegan or it's changing to a collective model, that I think pushes people to not take action a lot of times because it feels like it's perfect or bust.
Right. And I think that's the thing too, is a lot of people are like, I'll be interested in how it works out. And I'm thanks. I think I appreciate it. I appreciate it in a professional curiosity of it, but I wish what we heard more of was, wow, I hope other groups do this. And we've heard that too. But I'd like to hear a lot more of that because it's going to be easier for everybody if more of us are doing it to be able to learn from each other. And two, the organizations that we're looking to right now to get input, they're both in England. There's no US
Mm,
organization right now that we're looking to get input. If you have any listeners who are a collective that can help us, but
amazing.
it's just I'm just really proud of it and I'm just really excited by it. I don't think I've always been somebody who wants a lot of input. And so I
Mhm.
don't think that was a big shift for me. And I think that the important thing is always making sure that I don't think any organization needs to be held accountable is who it is that they're getting to work with them and who's on their board so that you know that the organization will always hold the ethics in which you started the organization with.
That's really beautiful. I'm excited to keep hearing about how that work is being done and what that looks like.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just overjoyed because it's just how it should be.
It does, I swear, I've said this before, I think on this podcast, but being in my 30s, I'm like, is the lesson here that cliches are real? Is that the lesson once you get to this age? Because I was just about to say, practice what you preach, but it is doing that. It is saying we want collective liberation. So within our organization, we're going to try a collective model.
Yep. Well, like we're
It is.
hypocrites, I feel like, right? I don't know.
That's part of the, I think, conversation in the vegan movement, right? It's a bit hypocritical to
Yeah.
only be talking about some things and say, no, that's not relevant here.
Right. Yeah, I always think that's funny because that's what we get when people don't want to hear about what's happening to animals. Like, oh, I don't want to know about that. You're like, but that's how it was in starting food. I don't want to hear about what's happening for child. I don't want to. You're like, you're
Mm.
treating me the exact same way that people who consume animals treat us. You're doing the same thing.
I know I was laughing with a friend about this the other day of just I could post something and simultaneously say talk about veganism and its benefits and it's amazing and it can and save this many animals and be a tool for collective liberation for all of us, and I'll simultaneously piss off meat eaters and vegans who are like animals only, and I'm just like, how is this possible?
No, I know that's yeah. So we live the same life. Yes.
I
That's
relate to you.
that's our funding issue. That's why we have funding issues. 'Cause
Oh,
vegans are like, yeah, but only do veganism. And other social justice, yeah, do that, but don't talk about veganism. So we have to find this very narrow people in the middle
yeah.
who get both, but we're trying to make that wider and wider, let's be clear, that we need to grow this group of people and show how they're connected. And I think we've been successful in doing that. I think everybody who's been working to do that, we're not there yet by any means, but I think that there are a lot of us who, and again, I credit a lot of you young people for why we're getting better at this.
Truthfully have admired you and the work that FEP does and look to it as a resource often.
Thank you. That means so much. That's exactly what we want to be. We want to be a resource and we want to be able to help people talk to other people, to do their papers if they have school papers that they need,
Mhm.
but also just expand their own thoughts on these things. Like every issue area that we talk about, we try to give people ideas on what they can do, and we try to be as practical as possible. Like for banana, we have a section on bananas on our website, and it's okay. The number one banana we recommend isn't really available everywhere. So we have to acknowledge that and say, okay, here's some other ones that we recommend, but please don't buy Chiquita and Dole and some of the
Right.
larger companies. So we try to make it as practical for people as possible. And yeah, I'm glad to know it's helpful for you.
And I think that a little bit of what that makes me think of, like, okay, so that's this best banana brand that is the most ethical is not available in these places, and so maybe that's not the choice someone can make. I feel like that goes back to that idea of perfectionism and that keeps people from trying some of these things, is that this all or nothing mentality that I think comes from all sides and a lot of movements. And do I hope that everyone listening to this is vegan, considering vegan, has some interest, or who everyone watches my reels? Yeah, of course. I'm not going to lie about that. But I also know that there's so many other factors than my perspective in life. And I struggle sometimes with vegan movements that demonize imperfection. Does that make sense?
Or name call it. I like we have a thing on our social medias. We do not let people say mean things to other people. It's not a safe space then. Like we want to have a safe space. And if you can't be respectful to other people and where they're at, then we don't want you calling people names. But yeah, I think that's it. It's this interesting thing that you bring up is it's either all or nothing. And that we need to recognize that something I mean, I'll put it this way. My husband and I like to hike, and sometimes when we're hiking, I look up and I'm like, "Oh my god, that's so high. There's absolutely no way I'm gonna be able to climb that." And so, I just start looking down at my feet, and if I just watch my feet and I watch what
Mm.
I'm doing little by little, I can tolerate it better than looking up at the big hill. So it's that journey. It's that journey of step by step that will take us there. And I think that's with everything, right? Because all the horrific things that are going on in this world right now, I don't know very many that are going to be stopped in just with one thing. It's going to take all of us taking these steps until we can get there together to make a change. And so as much as we can is to not look at that hill, look at our own feet, our thing and what it is that we can do as we try to change things.
And showing people those steps, right? Reminding other people they can look at their feet and don't have to look at the hill. Because if you only show them the big scary hill, myself included with things, you're like, maybe I just won't try.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
well, they can
mean,
join you on that hike. They can join you on that walk, and maybe they need to take a break
exactly.
in there. But as long as we don't forget that things need to change and that we have an obligation to change them all, we all need to keep going and we all need to be pushing things up and stop pushing things down.
All of the work that you've done is remarkable, but all of that work is not so flippant, is not easy. Did you know that? It wasn't easy? But I'm just curious how doing all that And whether it's the knowledge you have, the things you've seen, the work you do, the people you interact with, how do you take care of yourself in doing this work? Because it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. We're working on a bill right now for farm workers, and right before this, I had a call and it didn't go great with one of the committees. And it's hard. And I will say that taking care of myself is something I've struggled with for a very long time.
Mm,
Um, and because I've always a few years ago, I did a podcast and it was on self-care, and I was like, activism is my self-care. Because if I don't do activism, it's not good for me. And when I think about that, and I'm like, that's true. I have to, it whatever it may be that I see, if it's I have to buy an electronic device and I know how bad it is, I better write the company as I bought it and say, hey, I purchased you because of X, Y, and Z. I hope you do a take back program for your recyclable.
mm.
You don't dump overseas. So everything I do that I'm not comfortable with, I do something about. But there's some things, some suffering that's going on right now that I have to become two different people. Otherwise, I can't function in the world right now. So that's one
Oof.
way I take care of myself as I compartmentalize. Gosh, is that really a good thing to say? I
It's
also,
it's
yeah, it's this, yeah. So I do that. I have a therapist. I have a
same.
great partner. My husband is freaking amazing. And so I have somebody that I trust, who I love very much, and nature. And I have a silly bunny rabbit who makes me laugh. But yeah, I don't I this is something I work on. Like I still fight the whole like, if I do something for myself, I'm selfish. Like those things, this suffering is going on right now. How dare I do this?
How
Like
dare
these,
I have joy and show people that I'm living a happy life because others aren't? I struggle with this. I
yep.
talked about it in therapy today.
No, it's hard. It's hard. And I wish I had this great answer. I do not, other than separating myself into two people. So compartmentalize so I can function in this world because right now, if I exist in today, I couldn't advocate what needs to happen for tomorrow. Yeah. So I work on self-care, I would say. It's a struggle, but I'm working on it. Having somebody in my life who I actually would like to spend time with has helped tremendously. Otherwise, I would just work all the time.
Mm.
And I have some good people that I work with as well who are, even though they shouldn't be, help look out for me. Why are you still working? They're always like, why are you still working it off?
Collective care. That's part of collective care, right?
Exactly. They're allowed to tell me what to do, which I think they enjoy too much. But I do think it's important. I think that the me of in my 30s would not have liked the idea of self-care. I would have been like,
Mm.
that's selfish. There's so much suffering going on. We need to do everything. And now I'm like, please take care of yourself. There's so much horror in the world. And I just want to biotic bubble
Of
wrap
course.
everybody because it's just too much right now. It's too much.
Hmm.
And we need to figure out ways that we can restore ourselves.
I think that's a powerful reminder. I was chatting with a friend about this same idea, and they were like, if I dive in and only look at the horror and don't allow myself joy, I don't survive.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work either. I was like, yeah, that's real too,
Yeah. Yeah. We'd be in a fetal position crying, dying of heartbreak at this point.
truly.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to share with listeners that I haven't brought up or given you space to do? Not a trick question. I just like to make sure.
Is she looking for here? Well,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for having me and just having a podcast that is so open and honest and refreshing and is a conversation. It's nice to do these, and it's especially nice with like-minded people that I don't need to
Mm,
justify who I am or my existence or the organization's existence. That all seems pretty clear to you. And I very much seem to want to celebrate our existence. And that means the world to me because it is hard in what we do. And so it's nice to know when people really support it. So thank you. Do I want your listeners? Okay, one. I guess I wanted your listeners to know how original you are and what a good podcaster you are.
thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
I guess just reminding everybody just to everything sounds so trite, and I don't mean it that way, but really just to figure out ways in their world that they can help make the world a better place and lessen some of the suffering. If veganism seems easy, not everybody has access, but just making sure that we all try to do our part because there's so much going on that there's never going to be too much that we can do. that we owe it to each other, and we owe it to the animals, and we owe it to the planet, and we owe it to the future to just do something to help the world be a better place. And I know that sounds really corny, but I really mean it, because I really do believe that our actions and our voices together can create change, because I've seen it happen.
I agree. It's not corny. Cliches are real and true. That's what we just have to accept, that all the silly life quotes I would have rolled my eyes at, I'm like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you joining me this conversation. I know that listeners are going to love it, and also was rejuvenating for my spirit as well. So I really appreciate you and your energy.
Thank you. And thanks for all you do.
If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode of Consciously Clueless. And for that, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, tag me when you share in social media, or share this episode with others who may be interested in the topic. Any sharing truly means the world to me. Join the community at patreon.com/consciouslycarly for bonus podcast content like smoke sessions with Consciously Cannabis guests, video versions of solo episodes, monthly live calls, one-to-one support, more lifestyle content, mindfulness resources, and more. Until next time, stay consciously clueless.